Pranam and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to NIIT Conference 2022 Virtual Summit, Transformative Learning for Achieving Business Outcomes. It's been power-packed from insightful discussions about building high-performance organizations and role of learning in delivering business outcomes to propelling innovation and value creation. We talked about self-transformation, powering digital economy, navigating the next talent at the heart of strategy, double disruption, immersive technologies and learning, and we, of course, closed the day yesterday with recognition of our distinguished alumni. My dear ladies and gentlemen, our direct experience says it's all in the mind. Everything starts with the mind. If we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. Therefore, to transform the mind is the first step to transform the world. Sacred thread. Our next session will guide us to a path that will lead us to the transformation of the mind. May I request my dear friend Pratik to please introduce our next speaker, Mr. Pawar. Over to you, Pratik.
Thank you, Dilip. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our chairman, Mr. Rajendra Pawar. Mr. Pawar is the chairman and co-founder of NIIT Limited, a global leader in skills and talent development, and founder of NIIT University. Over the past 40 years, NIIT has established a presence in over 30 countries and impacted more than 38 million learners worldwide. Mr. Pawar was awarded Padma Bhushan by the President of India in 2011. He has served as the chairman of NASSCOM and is now chairing the Data Security Council of India. In 1998, Mr. Pawar served on Prime Minister Vajpayee's National Task Force commissioned to develop India into an IT superpower. And from 2009 to 2014, he served on Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's National Council on Skill Development. He is a distinguished alumnus of IIT Delhi, IT Man of the Year by Data Quest, and Entrepreneur of the Year by EY. Mr. Pawar is on the governing boards of Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and Scindia School, Gwalior. He has also served on the boards of IIT Delhi, IIM Bangalore, and IIM Udaipur. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Pawar.
Thank you, Pratik, and very hearty welcome to all of you who are giving time to be with us at Confluence. I sat through the sessions yesterday, I'm sure many of you did, and found them exceptionally invigorating and very exciting. So I have a few minutes to share some thoughts. And I wanted to put my thoughts together, and I was wondering how to combine such a vast range of matters and issues that are important when we are talking of building talent at this critical time. So I'm going to talk of my ideas in three parts. First of all, I want to talk of the context that we are in and the opportunity it represents. Then I'll spend a few minutes talking on matters of talent management. And then I'd like to talk of this acronym that I've created called Sacred Thread. And that's a framework of priorities. So let me start first by taking a minute or two on setting the context and taking a look at the opportunity. Now, the context today is basically COVID. It is an unprecedented, I love that word because it so accurately captures everything that's happening. And so COVID is indeed an unprecedented phenomenon, and which has really played havoc on us. We've all gone through difficult times. We are going through difficult times. But I want to say something in praise of the COVID. In my view, it is the best teacher we have had in the last 1 century. It has put each and every one of us into the crucible of learning, which basically says, learn and adapt or perish. So let's be clear about one thing, that we have no choice but to recognize this reality that we have to learn and adapt. So what's the opportunity? Now, there are two things I'd like to ensure that you take away from these 30 minutes you're spending with me. The first, that I do want to embed this idea firmly in your mind, that this is the opportunity for each of us, each one of us, and for each of you to recognize that you have to grab this opportunity, you have to seize it with both hands, and then understand the nature of the opportunity, internalize it in your own mind, and then fully implement it in your organization. Because this is the era of people leaders. We had a couple of centuries which we called as the industrial era, which was the era of the machine. And around the middle of the last century, we entered the era of information. We called it the knowledge era. We called it the service economy. But essentially, we moved from the era of the machine, or machine being at center, to being the mind being at center. This has been the big shift. And this century, which I'd love to call as the century of the mind, is all to do with humans, all to do with people. And therefore, we went through an era in the Industrial Revolution where the manufacturing guys became CEOs. Then we recognized that there's a market which we have to serve. And then the marketing fellows rose to be CEOs. And then, of course, we realized the real capital that we need is financial capital. And then the finance fellows rose to become CEOs. Then, of course, technology arrived on the scene, and the CTO route became the route for becoming CEOs. I firmly believe that now we are in the era of talent being the key resource. And therefore, I am looking forward to seeing many of you who are talent leaders being the future CEOs. And that's why you have to seize the opportunity. So that's one thing I want you to carry away, deeply embedded in your mind. The second one, there are some thoughts I have on how to deal with this opportunity. So it's not a mantra, but I'll call it a framework of priorities. And in this framework of priorities, at the center of it all is talent. So now let me talk about the second part, which is some matters of talent management. And there are two things I want to talk about here. One is, what are the talent management challenges? And to put that into context, the second is, what is happening when we talk of the transformation of work? The two are linked. In the talent management challenges, there are two. The first is that the demand supply of talent, at least in the sectors that all of us are involved in, not every sector. Hospitality is not valid, travel is not valid, but in the sector that we are all involved in, there's an absolute imbalance in the demand and supply of talent. And I'm sure every one of you agrees that companies are at the receiving end of this imbalance. The individual is now in control in this demand-supply equation. And that is showing up in terms of a few very clear metrics. For example, you make an offer, what percentage of people join? That percentage is dipping, number one. Second, compensation is beginning to become very turbulent, unpredictable, and of course, moving upwards. Third is attrition levels are beginning to rise. Now, I wouldn't like to get carried away by the numbers that come from the US, which is unfortunately what most of us read, because that's not the situation in India. It's a problem, but attrition is going up. It's not like America says that 80% of people change their jobs, but attrition levels are going up. That metric is visible. And as a consequence of that, this is something which we have to be very truthful to acknowledge, that if you are in the service business and the people business and you have attrition, there is no question about the fact that service quality is coming under stress. So this is the consequence of this very disturbed demand-supply balance of talent. The second challenge is even deeper. Of course, all of you, as people who deal with talent, would have sensed it. But this is that the work-life balance, which is the second balance, is transformed completely. We've lived a very easy life that work-life balance means what time do you go to office and what time do you come back. And we had these neat silos. Now, COVID has broken that or smashed through those set of operating beliefs in which we did a work-life balance. So all formats, all silos, all structures of how to be balanced work and life have collapsed. And that is the second challenge in managing talent. The second part of matters of talent management I talked about is work transformation. So first of all, I think place of work, place of home. The demarcation in terms of space as well as time, the day, are all gone out of the window. It's evaporated. Those divides, clean divides, which helped us to manage talent, have evaporated. So if you're working at home and you have a little child and the mother's also working and the baby starts to cry, you have very little choice but to put yourself on mute, hide for a minute, and then go and serve and do something that's very important in your life, which you were ignoring when you were at work. So work and home, both time and space, the demarcations have dissolved. The second is there's digitization and platformization of everything. Even if you look at most of these employee services which are self-serve now, everything is platformized. Everything is digitized. The third, and a very important one, is the models of engagement. When we say, are people engaged or not? So the question is, engaged with what? We only talk of engaged with other people. But the models of engagement are that people are connected to people, and that's happening phenomenally well. I don't know how effective it is, but we can communicate with anybody at any time, in any group, in any format, with the Zooms of the world. But people-to-people formats of connecting are changing. People to data, it's a very, very big connect. And then you have IoT and your fridge is talking to you. You can go on to Google and get data of anything. You go to hundreds of sources of data. So people's connection with data, that format is changing. People to process. I talked about your company's running processes, your development platforms, the processes that run the organization. People's connection with those processes are changing. Then people's connection with customers. In fact, now in our development laboratory, our development guys are directly in touch with customers. Never had imagined that, because there were so many layers between the back-end guys and the front-end guys. And similarly, our connection with suppliers, each one of us. So the whole supply chain is disintermediated. All these things are disintermediated. They're disintermediated. They're frictionless. They're rapid. So therefore, the models of engagement in these 2 years, I think we've been subjected, as I said, we've been in a crucible. And there's aggressive disintermediation in all these models of work. And a plus perhaps is that the points of friction, the small chores that we were also engaged in doing, that friction is missing. So how to get stuff, how to send stuff, how to get a service, how to pay and collect, these are becoming more and more friction-free. So these elements are transforming work in a radical way. And therefore now, I want to say, therefore, what do we do as talent leaders? So I was trying to figure out what all we have to do. And then I looked at 6 things that we need to become very, very focused on as a capability set in the organization. So capability sets earlier used to be how proficient is somebody in data science, or how good is a person in programming, or how good are they in testing. I'm afraid that's a very, very limited but a very important part of the competency set. So the 6 words which are captured in the acronym SACRED, I come to the SACRED thread. I'll talk of each of these and then I'll put them into a context. The first S is sensitivity. So what does that mean? That talks about the ability for us to listen, to sense, to open up and share, and then to build a basis of trust so that what we hear, what we say, what we sense is the real thing. Because if trust is low, you get distortion. So sensitivity, building this capability is the first of the capabilities that you have to build with your talent. And of course, this begins at the top. So I'll come to the attributes of these 6 capabilities. But I want to give examples, and some examples I want to give, something that I'm personally involved in, are relevant in this COVID time. Probably I'll exaggerate those examples because I see this, as I said, a terrific crucible of learning. So we pride ourselves, like many of you do and your companies do, in being very aware of where our people are and what's in their mind. And ever since COVID started, particularly last year when the second wave started, I found myself spending an extraordinary amount of time understanding the situation of every fellow NIIT. And we've had a very active engagement on this issue of the wellness of my colleagues, or NIITians as we call them. And there's been a huge amount of attempts to truly understand the risk, the pain, the difficulty, the challenges of each and every one of our people. And I've personally been tracking, then when we found that when the vaccine has come, been personally tracking that one dimension to see how many people are affected. And at the peak of it, till a few months ago, it was pretty much an online activity, but I'm watching very closely. And just to let you know, everything comes, and I just took a printout to be able to show it. As of a week ago, because this is every week, I take a deeper look. On 31st, currently infected people in the company were 0. That had been the situation, remained as the situation for 4 weeks. 99.1% of our people had been vaccinated. And we had 21 people who had still not taken a single dose. So many weeks ago, when I was looking at this number as a total, well, the number was coming down quickly. And even on 10th of December, there were still 29 people who had no dose. And then we were looking more deeply at why have they not taken a dose? Now we fully recognize there is the choice of each person. This is not something we can enforce. And since we are all working from home, there isn't even a need to enforce. Now, as we know, all over the world, people are saying that fine, you can exercise the choice, but then if you have to come into the workplace, then the risk, to mitigate the risk of the larger community, we may have to take some policy decisions. However, that's not the point. The point here is Why are they not? And then I, of course, discovered many weeks ago that there were maternity cases. At one time, we had about 30 of them. And then when I talk of empathy, I'll come back, but let me bring it forward. Then we found that some of them in that group, in the large group discussions, women had indeed gone ahead and taken because their doctors told them it's safe. So we created a community of all women and all men whose wives were expecting, or people who were in that phase of maternity. And each of them was connected to a doctor. So many of them created that doctor community as well. And that community actually was then engaging, and I talked about people-to-people engagement, with that issue at hand. And then there were those who had comorbidities, or people in their homes had comorbidities. And there were people with diabetes. There was a group, there was someone with hypertension. So that was again understandable. There was a big chunk of still hesitant to agreeing to do it who were fence sitters. There, I think a nudge had to be given. And there continues to be one person who refuses to take. And finally, I had to have a chat with him and to tell him, look, there's no pressure on you, but I do want to understand. And I did then finally understand that a person close to him had had a reaction of blood clots. As some of you know, there were very, very few situations, and there was no way he was going to take the COVID. And so we have to be careful of how to help that person continue to work while dealing with this difficulty. So sensitivity is on many dimensions. Just picked one, which is an important one today. A in sacred is for agility. And that's to do with the bias for quick action, the freedom to act, and the empowerment. So it's both about the initiative of the individual, but it's also about a culture of empowerment where people feel empowered, the supervisors feel empowered. And again, two small, very small COVID stories. The person who heads up a platform development for learning has a team of about 100 people. And he was telling us that for them, it's very important to do innovation, which can be done in small groups, which physically do it face to face, but they've found ways to use tools which help them collaborate. And they concluded quite early on that keying in was not a great option. So they are back to doing what they were doing on the whiteboards, that they write in their own hand and send those messages to each other or put it on a common page. And people scribble on that and so on. Not new, but extremely useful to say that you don't have to do the normal documentation at this point in time. Do the documentation that works. Do the things that work in this period of agility. And similarly, in the same group, this leader recognized, because many are young people, married with little kids or parents, that he recognized that this day of work, that you sit at work from this time to this time, is an absolutely artificial, man-created, dysfunctional constraint under the current circumstances. So he made an arrangement with them. He says, okay, there's an hour in a day, we'll call it as flow time, where nobody disturbs anybody. There's an hour in the day when you can send your messages to each other, or there can be huddles. And the rest of the time, it's asynchronous. You send me a message, I'll send you a message, because I may be attending to a very important personal chore at home. So the day is getting fragmented. And then it'll come in the end to personal quality, because then how do you make sure that people are being able to balance the day? So that's agility. C is for connectivity. Now, this is an organizational capability. It's an infrastructure matter. It's about your networks, devices, connectivity, and then processes, practices. And this is about the connectivity, people to people, people to data, people to systems, customers, and so on. If it's an organizational capability, it's about the platforms that you have in the organization to help people to do things. And again, this is something which all of us in this group at least understand fully, that how we are doing the platformization of work. R is readiness. And this readiness is about getting talent ready. Again, something which we have, I think, really invested bulk of our time. Most of your work is about talent readiness. It's about goal clarity, role clarity, skills needed, just in time versus just in case skills. It's about learning on tap. It's about immersive learning. And this is where I think pedagogy is important. And there are my colleagues who've been talking of this when we talk of stack route, when we talk of many of these methods. So this is again something we have as organizations learned the most, and it's a management task. E is for empathy. And I think this is about reaching out. If sensitivity is about getting to know, empathy is about responding. I gave some examples, but it's about reaching out. It's about relating with issues. It's about engaging with the personal lives of our people. And it's what I would call about the COVID moments. I think all of us recognize that. And here I have 100 stories. I will not go into all of them. All of us are dealing with these stories. I mean, this is where millions of stories. And finally, about discipline. I think this is a personal agenda for every individual. It's about personal excellence. It's about personal management. It's about personal quality. If we dealt with quality as a process thing, as a machine thing, and now in the century of the mind, it's about each individual's personal quality to pursue zero defect, to meet every requirement in time, to honor every commitment that is made, to give ideas which are superior. So personal quality is the aspect of discipline. Now, these 6 things, which I term as a framework of priorities, are basically 3 set of things. There's a sensitivity and empathy. I talked about these 2, right? This is about culture building. This is where vision and values will tie things together. This is the central role of leadership. And this is done, and this is taught through role modeling, storytelling, and immersive experiential learning. And this is the hardest thing to do for all of you as L&D managers. The second group, connectivity and readiness. This is about organizational competencies, about process capability, about infrastructure readiness. And this, as again, the role of leadership is the role of management. This is about, and this, by the way, is the most trainable of the 3. And we mastered that art to a large extent. The third group is the agility and discipline. These are agility and discipline. And here, basically, this is the role of each individual. This is the role of the operatives. This is about passion, and this is about personal excellence. And here, the topic that I want to talk about is personal quality. When we did a quality movement, we realized very soon that if people don't live quality, how will the company live quality? And we started an initiative. It went on for 6 years, 96 to 99 as a personal quality initiative, which became then leadership circles. How do first-line supervisors upward help operatives to achieve personal excellence? And this is more trainable than the leadership aspect of sensitivity, but far less trainable than the second one. So in closing, I would say, I did talk that this is the time for those who deal with talent, and all of us remember that song which says, "Apna time aayega." And I want to tell each one of you, aapka time aa gaya hai. There was a time for the manufacturing guys. There was a time for the finance guys. There was a time for the technology guys. It is now time for the talent people to lead organizations. So the L&D heads now have to raise the game. You have to raise your game. You have to make talent a board agenda, which it is in companies which are led by people leaders, but not in all. And you have to cause it to happen. And then you have to drive the organizational transformation. And my little framework, I presume, or I hope, would help you to put all of these things together so that this 6 beads which you put into a thread, and that are called the sacred thread, are a vast range of activities and responsibilities that you have as a learning and development leader. I've heard of mindset and skill set. I want to expand that, make it more explicit. So I hope this has been helpful. Now, I wonder if there are questions. We probably have a minute to go. I'm trying to see if there's anything. How to build a listening skill under stressful development. Do you think the current stage in compensation accompanying attrition may impact our growth in the tech sector, or will we have a potential to absorb costs? So let me just take this one particularly, I think, because I read somewhere that companies all over the world have recognized that it's not just work from home, it's work from anywhere. So a smart startup in the most expensive city of New York can now have the workforce sitting in Delhi. Do you think he or she will give a Delhi salary or a New York salary? And what will that do to the compensation of each of the millions of people that all of you on this talk are looking at? I think the answer to me is not just to respond with salary. The answer is with engagement. And engaged, everybody wants to work because they want to engage in meaningful stuff. They want to engage with other people who are involved in meaningful stuff. They want to engage with friction-free processes which make it easy. They want to engage with a set of people who care about them. So the answers, once again, are there, I'm sure, in the minds of all of you. I just want you to bring it up and bring it to the board and reshape the priorities of the board to deal with talent the way each of you, I know, believes that it should be met. So thank you very much. And I want to hand it back to Dilip.
Thank you, sir. And I'll now deviate from my script because I'm so inspired. The discipline, apna samay aa gaya. And if we don't make the most of this time, and discipline being the most important, a couplet quickly got formed in my mind saying, "Main samay ko khojta raha aur samay mujhe gawa kar chala gaya." May we all get disciplined and time may not lose us. Thank you, sir. Sacred thread, ladies and gentlemen.